From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
And a good morning to you. Welcome to Sunday Edition. Today we'll be talking with Salt Lake's Mayor Mendenhall about the potential of a Major League stadium here in the city and also what the flooding season was like for the capital city. And the Utah Department of Safety, they'll be joining us. Staying safe on the roads this summer will be the topic. But first, giving a little insight into the news of Congressman Chris Stewart stepping down from his position as 2nd District Congressman, we have Salt Lake County Clerk Lannie Chapman with us. And this happened a few years back when Jason Chaffetz decided that he would resign from his seat very, very early in the term. And it left everybody kind of going, we haven't done this, and what exactly happens? Ultimately, it was figured out, but will it basically be the same game plan? And maybe you could walk us through that game plan with my friend Chris Stewart.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here.
So what's going to happen, according to Utah law, as it stands, once Representative Stewart provides his irrevocable resignation, and he could do that at any time, that starts a timeline. That gives the governor 7 days to issue a proclamation. In that proclamation, he's going to outline when candidate filing will take place, when the primary election will take place, and then when that final special election will take place. And as we know, current law says that the election cannot take place earlier than 90 days after that order is given. Mm-hmm. So the earliest we could probably have it would be the November general election.
I know as we look back on Congressman Curtis's run, and boy, he joked about it. He felt like he was running every couple of months. And this one, if I'm doing the calculating correctly, is going to be rather interesting as well. Whoever does step up here, and if they decide to not just complete Congressman Stewart's tenure and to run again, they're going to have a busy, couple of years.
They better get their running shoes ready. Exactly. You're not wrong.
Exactly. As far as the 90 days that you mentioned, let's assume that the 90 days started like next week. And so we have to really react. We have kind of the off-year elections. A lot of mayoral races, things like that are happening. Is there a chance that this could blend into maybe not being a special election, but being part of the off-year election?
So unless the legislature gets together and does a special session to make a special election, that would exactly be what happens. So the primary for this seat, for the parties, would take place during, at the earliest, the November general election this November.
We were kicking around and, kind of lightheartedly talking about everybody and their dog appears now to be very interested in running for this seat. And what will they have to do? What is the process like for somebody? Let's just assume they're going to declare, they're ready to go, and maybe they've even tried this before in another office-seeking thing. What actually happens?
So as soon as the governor issues his order, the parties and candidates have between 21 and 28 days, so candidates can gather signatures. They have to get at least 7,000 signatures. So as we know, this Congressional District 2 has about 400,000 active registered voters in it. In Salt Lake County, we have about 130,000 of those. So it kind of spans the whole width or the length of the state of Utah.
Right.
So that would be a lot of signatures to gather. But at that same time, the parties can convene, have a convention, and nominate their candidate.
Is that essential, or could it just simply be done by gathering signatures? Usually the party wants a big hand in this.
Definitely the party will want to take part in this.
Right. You mentioned the district itself. The 2nd District has always been unique because it is so huge. And even with the 4th seat that we got several cycles ago, it's still, as you mentioned, other than the upper Grouse Creek area and Box Elder area of the state, it just goes all the way down the western side and then even across our southern border. And one of the articles that I was reading regarding this was, this is as big as the state of Indiana.
You're not wrong. It does the whole Wasatch Front. There's a lot of urban, a lot of rural, a lot of desert. So this congressional seat has a huge part to play in Utah and Utah politics.
So this affects, boy, not only Salt Lake County, because, you know, it's interesting how the divvying up actually happens. And, you know, I remember the first time that they developed the 4th Congressional District, how controversial that was. But, boy, in Salt Lake County, it's going to be interesting, and it's going to put a certain responsibility, if not burden, on each and every county clerk, including yourself. How much of Salt Lake County is in the 2nd District?
So we have a little bit more than 2/3. So as you know, Salt Lake County it's separated up into all 4 congressional districts.
Right.
So quite a large chunk of us in Salt Lake County are part of that congressional too. It includes Salt Lake, Mill Creek, South Salt Lake, West Valley, a little bit of Magna, and Kearns as well.
Depending on how the census and how the allocation shakes out. One time I was hosting a town hall meeting. We happened to be at Churchill Junior High School, just above Wasatch Boulevard, and it had barely happened. And so I was having a town hall meeting with the senators and the representatives locally, our state representatives, and it was a really good evening. And finally, at the very, very end, an elderly gentleman stood up and he said, "Can any of you tell us what district we're in right here?" Not one of us could, because we were like the epicenter. You know, it's one of those things like being in the 4 corners.
Sure.
You can actually be in 4 states at the same time. You can almost do that up in that area. What kind of a cost burden does this put on the county, with it being, we anticipate, within the mayoral races and the other off-year races? Does it add a financial burden?
So it will, and again, there's so many variables here. So if it goes with that November election, the cost to Salt Lake County won't be a tremendous cost, because we have so many mayoral races and at-large races for those municipalities that are included in Congressional District 2. Right. So I think a couple $1,000s minimum for Salt Lake County. However, can't say the same for the other counties.
Because some of them are all 2nd District and really rural and so on. I thank you so much for spending time with us on Sunday Edition and walking us through this, and we'll see how this goes. It's going to be interesting who steps up.
It will be very interesting.
And how many step up.
Yes, we look forward to learning more, and as soon as we do, we'll let your viewers and our constituents know.
Thank you so very, very much. And of course, we wish the absolute best to Congressman Stewart and his family. We have a lot more coming up. Mayor Mendenhall will be joining us. Stay with us. And welcome back to Sunday Edition. We're delighted to have Salt Lake City's Mayor Aaron Mendenhall with us. And Mayor, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And there's so much to talk about, but let's start with the flooding. It's kind of whatever has been on everybody's mind. We were chatting off the air that some of the old timers, and as I mentioned to you, even older than me, are saying, well, I can remember the days back in 49 and whatever. And of course, many of us, you know, remember 83. How did Salt Lake City fare this time around?
And you know, we're not yet through, but so far we're faring very well for the epic winter that we had, which we have to be grateful for. We knew we needed the water. The lake desperately needed the water. Even our reservoirs were quite low. So in terms of capacity to handle this major runoff that we're in the midst of, we had downstream flow capacity, reservoir capacity. Our pipes are better than they were in 83. The system can handle it as long as we keep it clear. And you know, we had that flood at Wasatch Hollow Park up around 1700 South and 17th East. A major blockage in the culvert system there that caused it to spill over onto the roadway. We had 3 homes with some minor damage, but all in all, it could have been far worse. Thousands of volunteers came out, bagged thousands more sandbags. We worked quickly and even through the night. And though there are still several weeks left of runoff, we're doing very well, and our system can handle it if we keep the debris out.
You know, we hear about the debris, and that was one of the big issues way back in '83. You know, a major outlet for the water to head toward the Great Salt Lake was blocked. And as a matter of fact, there's a little monument back many years ago here at Broadcast House under the viaduct where many of the culprit rocks were. So it was kind of a perfect storm. But this year, I'm so grateful for the moisture. And you mentioned the Great Salt Lake. We have a commission to look over the Great Salt Lake and a commissioner and so on. And it looks like some real traction has been made, but the experts are saying don't bank on this.
We know this winter was unique. It was an epic winter for us in terms of snowpack and now the flow that we have coming down. But we also know because of its uniqueness, it's unlikely that we're going to have subsequent winters in the next few years that look just like that. Even with this amount of snowpack and the water flow, it extends the livelihood of this lake from 5 years to about 7 years, according to the scientists who told us last fall. We have 5 years until a total collapse of that ecosystem unless we do some dramatic restoration of the water levels. So it really is going to boil down to what we use and what we choose not to use. And this is much more than a Salt Lake City alone conversation, but we are doing a lot locally to reduce our consumption. And this month, the City Council is considering an impact fee. Basically, if you are one of the highest water users in those summer months, then you may see a drought surcharge added to your bill. You'd end up paying a significant amount more unless you reduce that water consumption.
Interesting. But before we leave the Great Salt Lake, I've lived here my whole life, born and raised Salt Lake City and in the surrounding area. And I've learned more about the ecosystem of the Great Salt Lake in the last year and a half, 2 years than I ever had in the previous, I won't mention how many. But I mean, everything from the brine shrimp to the brine flies that are so important to the birds and everything else. I had no idea, and I understand that the salinity of the water has diminished a little bit, and that's really taking a lot of pressure off of our precious brine shrimp.
I don't think we appreciated the Great Salt Lake as Utahns, at least in the last 100 years, as much as we do now. It's not just the namesake of our capital city, but millions and millions of birds from multiple continents rely on this special place to keep their species going. And I think that part of our reaction to learning about the decline of the lake in recent years was in part because of the way we've felt about the lake, but so much of our community really didn't appreciate it as much as we do now. I'm grateful that we do.
Oh, and then if you think if much more dried up, the winds and the dust and the particles and the really nasty stuff in that dust. But let's get back to Salt Lake City and what we can all do, those who live within the city and outside the city. This is not just a localized issue. This is an Intermountain West issue, along with perhaps having a surcharge. What is being done within the city to encourage water conservation?
So far, up to this point, we haven't done anything to require anyone to change, except for ourselves at city government, where we have put restrictions on our water use at public lands that we operate for the last 2 years. Still, Salt Lakers and people using Salt Lake City water have conserved 2.9 billion gallons last year alone, just because we asked them to. Conservation is coming naturally, I think, for us as Westerners, and it makes sense when we're faced with the threats of the lake. We'll continue to ask our constituents to do that, but we're going to improve our own systems as well in Salt Lake City. You may see some changes to some of our parks and public lands and the way we water, when we water, and it's appropriate that we do that. Even if the lake recovers in the coming years, as we hope it does, we are living in a high desert, and these are the kind of investments that are right for us to do in perpetuity.
Mayor, there's so many issues that face every city, but Salt Lake City is our capital city. We all feel, even if we don't live within the boundaries, that we have a stake in this. What about the housing, and what about some of the things that you're most concerned about for the city?
Yeah, we have been in a housing crisis for as long, at least, as my 17-year-old's been on this planet with us. That's a long time to be looking down the barrel of the fastest growing population in the nation over the last decade and a growing housing crisis that I don't think we expected to last quite this long. And Salt Lake City downtown, for example, we've had about 4,900 residents for a long time. By January of 2025, we'll have 10,000 people living in the downtown core alone. We are the fastest growing state, and we need to grow our housing opportunities in a way that's reflective of that. So our quality of life, so our kids, our grandkids can see themselves living here. And that's not a partisan issue.
Right.
We've been investing in Salt Lake City in a big way in affordable housing. And since I took office in 2020, we have increased our investment in affordable housing units by 413%. That equates to about 4,000 new units of affordable housing in the city. But our dollars go so much farther when we partner with the county and the state of Utah. And the state has stepped up in a tremendous way in the last 2 legislative sessions,
right,
with over $100 million altogether toward especially deeply affordable housing, which helps those folks in our communities who are now unhoused and living homeless on the streets of Salt Lake City and other places.
Mayor, we are almost out of time, but I've got one really quick little comment, more than a question. I was talking to somebody just prior to having you here on the show who is very much involved in the effort to have Major League Baseball come to Salt Lake City. And I was seeing some enthusiasm that just brightened my spirits about this. Just very quickly, how optimistic are you about Major League Baseball?
Tremendously. We're ready. Salt Lake City is leveling up, and we're ready for a Major League team. And the opportunity at the Power District, where Rocky Mountain Power has been for so long, is unmatched in this country. So I think we have a very good chance, and Salt Lake City wants to see that happen here.
Mayor, it's so good to have you on the line.
Thank you for having me.
I almost said on the line like the old radio show here on the air with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Mayor Mendenhall with us, and we will be right back. Stay with us. Last guest for today's program is the Safety Outreach Administrator with the Utah Department of Transportation, and Kirsten Hoshauer is here with us. And Kirsten, thank you so much for being part of Sunday Edition today. And maybe we can kick off our conversation. The focus, of course, should be every day, 0 fatalities. There is nothing that we can settle for, nothing less that we can settle for. And I've so appreciated that effort over the years. How are we doing this year? Here we are in June. We're basically halfway, almost halfway through the year. What are the stats?
Right, yeah. So this year we're actually doing a bit better. So, so far this year we've had 87 crashes, and which is better than it was last year, and we've had 99 fatalities so far this year. Yeah. But in comparison to last year, at this time last year we were at 130.
Oh wow!
So 99 is horrible. We don't want to be seeing anywhere near that number at this time of year, but we are actually getting better over the past couple of years. We hit our worst last year. Yeah. So I'm hoping this is a trend that we're going to be continuing to improve.
The effort has been so important, I think, and draws so much attention. And I'm just going to throw in a little plug for what we're doing next weekend, the Ride to Light Up Eureka. Yeah. From day one, we started doing that in 1911, not quite 2011. And it's just been so much fun, for one thing. We haven't done it every year, but almost every year. And, UDOT Zero Fatalities has been with us every single year. And the support that we get, and it's so important. All safety, whether it's a pedestrian, whether it's a cyclist, whether it's a motorcyclist or traditional vehicle, boy, it's so important for us to watch out for each other.
Right. Yeah, and this is such a great event for us to, focus on motorcycle safety and making sure that motorists see the motorcyclists and that motorcyclists are doing what they can to be safe, and just really putting some emphasis on that. And we just love participating too.
It is so important because everybody has a role. And, sometimes motorcyclists, and I ride motorcycle, but, we sit back and go, everybody else ought to be watching out for us. But boy, there's such an obligation for everybody. And the role for the motorcyclists to do everything humanly possible to not only make themselves safe, but others is so important. So that Ride to Light Up Eureka is happening next Saturday. And again, I can't thank you enough. We've actually got you guys strategically located right there at the crossroads. Well, yeah, the crossroads of Highway 68, which is a Utah State highway that goes down the west side of Utah Lake, and then Highway 6. And that's just below Eureka. And so it's a good chance for everybody to take a deep breath, get a little instructions on what to do and where to go, and to take it easy through those really sharp winding turns just about 2 miles below Eureka, and you guys have been terrific on that.
Yeah, we love to participate. Every time it's offered to us, we love to participate.
Let's talk about what is planned for the summertime and what are some of the, maybe if there are some, normally we'd call them sweet spots. These are not sweet spots. They're very dangerous, spots. What are the time periods and the areas that you are most concerned about?
Right. So, we hear that summer is the 100 deadliest days. So we do know that it is actually the most dangerous time. People think, maybe snow or rain or worse, but actually those days when it's sunny and beautiful outside is when we see the most number of crashes and fatalities. And so that's what we're doing this summer. We're getting out and we're actually doing a campaign called Back to Basics. And we're going to be out there. We're already out there on social media and on television, just reminding people about those basics, what we may have forgotten since we've been in driver's ed. Yeah. And, we have teamed up with driver ed teachers and all kinds of our partners with DPS and UDOT, and we're just really trying to get out there to, focus on those things that maybe we've forgotten, like, the distance we should take between vehicles, putting on our blinkers, wearing our seatbelts, making sure we're 3 feet away from a cyclist, watching out for pedestrians, and making sure that they're crossing in crosswalks and that we're seeing them. So just stuff like that.
I so appreciate you joining us. I wish we had more time to talk, but I think we've hit some really important points. The idea is the only acceptable goal is 0 fatalities. There's something we all can do regardless of how we transport ourselves, walking, cycling, motorcycling, or traditional vehicles. And I thank you so much. And again, a personal thanks to you and UDOT and all the great people for supporting our Ride to Light Up Eureka.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so very much. And the Ride to Light Up Eureka happens next Saturday. There's still time for everybody to register. And by the way, it's not just motorcycles. We love to have vehicles come along, and we have quite a few each and every year. Everything from classic show cars to just really cool Corvettes and so on have joined us on the ride, and it all helps a great little town, Eureka, Utah. Thanks so much. We won't be here next week because of the French Open in tennis, but join us the week after. And that will be, by the way, my final episode of Sunday Edition. We'll look forward to seeing